The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the general store, sending dust spiraling into the Nebraska air. And Prudence Foster stepped down with nothing but the threadbare dress on her back and a heart full of desperate hope. She stood there on the main street of Kearney, shielding her eyes against the August sun of 1878, searching the faces of the few people who had bothered to look her way. Her fingers trembled as they clutched the small paper with the address she had memorized weeks ago during the long journey from Boston. The dress she wore had once been blue, but time and wear had faded it to something closer to gray. Her boots, inherited from a cousin who had passed 3 years prior, pinched her toes something terrible, but they were all she had. A tall man separated himself from the shadows of the store's awning, and Prudence felt her breath catch. He was easily over 6 feet, with shoulders that spoke of hard work and a face weathered by the elements. His hat sat low over dark eyes that seemed to take her in with one sweeping glance. He wore simple clothes, clean but well worn, and his hands looked strong as they held his hat when he removed it in greeting. "Miss Foster." His voice was deep, rougher than she had imagined during all those nights when she read and reread his letters by candlelight. "Mr. Patterson." She tried to keep her voice steady, tried not to let him see how terrified she was. Fletcher Patterson." He stepped closer, and she noticed he moved with a slight limp, favoring his left leg. "Welcome to Nebraska." Was the journey difficult? Prudence almost laughed at the understatement. The journey had been hell itself. She had sold everything she owned to afford the train ticket west, had gone hungry more nights than not, and had endured the judgment of every person who learned she was traveling alone to marry a stranger. But she simply nodded. "It was long, Mr. Patterson." "Fletcher, please." He gestured toward a wagon hitched nearby. "The ranch is about an hour's ride. I thought we might stop by the preacher's house first if that suits you. Get the legal matters settled." Legal matters. He meant the marriage. Prudence felt her stomach twist. She had known this was coming, had agreed to it in her letters, but standing here in the flesh made everything suddenly, terrifyingly real. "I understand if you have reservations," Fletcher said quietly, seeming to read her hesitation. "I know this is not how most women imagine getting married. If you need time to reconsider, I can arrange for a room at the boarding house. No obligations." The kindness in his offer nearly undid her. Prudence blinked back tears and shook her head. "No, I made a promise in my letters, and I intend to keep it. I have nowhere else to go, Mr. Patterson." "Fletcher, I would not be here if I had any other choice." Something flickered across his face, but he nodded. "Honesty. I appreciate that, Miss Foster, and for what it is worth, I am glad you are here." They stood in awkward silence for a moment before Fletcher offered his arm. Prudence placed her hand on it lightly, feeling the solid muscle beneath the fabric of his shirt. He helped her into the wagon with surprising gentleness for such a large man, and she arranged her skirts as best she could, acutely aware of every patch and mended tear. The ride to the preacher's house took only minutes. Reverend Morrison was a jovial man with a kind wife who insisted on serving tea and cookies, despite Prudence's protests. The ceremony itself was brief and businesslike, with the Reverend's wife and the town clerk standing as witnesses. When Fletcher slipped a simple gold band on her finger, Prudence stared at it in shock. "It was my mother's," Fletcher said softly, so only she could hear. "She would have wanted you to have it." The preacher pronounced them man and wife, and Fletcher leaned down to brush the briefest, most chaste kiss across Prudence's cheek. His lips were warm, and he smelled of soap and leather, and something earthy she could not quite name. They climbed back into the wagon, and this time the silence felt different, weighted with the knowledge that they were now bound together by law and before God. Prudence twisted the ring on her finger, marveling at its delicate craftsmanship. "You did not have to give me something so precious," she said. "You are my wife now. What was precious to my family is yours too." Fletcher kept his eyes on the road ahead. "The ranch is not much, but it is honest work and honest land. I have about 300 head of cattle, a house that needs a woman's touch, and 2 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse. Sam is older, been with me since my father's time. Billy is young, only 19, but he works hard." Prudence nodded, trying to take it all in. "I can cook and clean. I can sew and mend. I will earn my keep, Fletcher. I promise you that." He turned to look at her then, and she saw something in his eyes she could not quite read. "You are not a servant, Prudence. You are my wife. There is a difference." "But I came with nothing," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I have no dowry, no possessions beyond this dress. I cannot even offer you a good name. My family was poor, and when the factory where I worked closed, I had no prospects. I answered your advertisement because I was desperate, and I think you deserve to know that." Fletcher was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the creaking of the wagon wheels and the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves. Finally, he spoke. "My wife died 4 years ago. Cholera took her and our unborn child. I thought I would never want to marry again, but this ranch is too much for one man, and the loneliness got to be too much to bear. I placed that advertisement because I too was desperate in my own way. So maybe we are both starting from a place of need, and maybe that is not such a bad thing." The honesty of his words touched something deep in Prudence's chest. She blinked back tears and looked out at the rolling Nebraska plains stretching in every direction. The land was so different from Boston, so open and wild. It both thrilled and terrified her. "I will try to be a good wife to you," she said quietly. "And I will try to be a good husband to you," Fletcher replied. They rode in more comfortable silence after that, and Prudence began to notice details about her new home. The grass was tall and golden, rippling like waves in the wind. Here and there, she spotted cattle grazing peacefully. The sky seemed impossibly big, stretching from horizon to horizon without the interruption of tall buildings or factory smoke. When the ranch house finally came into view, Prudence felt her breath catch again. It was larger than she had expected, a sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch wrapping around the front. The wood was weathered but well maintained, and she could see a barn, several outbuildings and corrals in the distance. "It is beautiful," she breathed. Fletcher seemed pleased by her reaction. "My father built the main house when he first claimed this land. I added the 2nd story after I married my first wife. There is a kitchen, parlor, and dining room downstairs, 3 bedrooms upstairs. You can choose whichever one you like for yourself." "For myself?" Prudence turned to him in surprise. He cleared his throat, and she noticed a faint flush creeping up his neck. "I assumed you would want your own space. We barely know each other, Prudence. I will not force myself on you. When and if you are ready for a true marriage, that will be your decision to make." Prudence felt tears sting her eyes again at his consideration. She had heard horror stories from other women about their wedding nights, about husbands who took what they considered their rights without care for their wives' feelings. "Thank you," she whispered. Fletcher pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house, and before he could climb down, 2 men emerged from the barn. The older one, Sam, she presumed, had gray hair and a weather-beaten face that spoke of years in the sun. The younger Billy was gangly and fresh-faced with curious eyes that widened when he saw Prudence. "Boys, this is my wife, Prudence," Fletcher said, helping her down from the wagon. "Prudence, this is Sam Cooper and Billy Hayes." Sam removed his hat and nodded respectfully. "Madam, welcome to the Patterson Ranch." Billy stammered something that might have been a greeting, his face turning beet red. Sam elbowed him in the ribs, and the young man managed a more coherent, "Pleased to meet you, madam." "The pleasure is mine," Prudence said, offering them both a warm smile. "I hope we will all get along well." Fletcher placed a hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward the house. "Let me show you around." The interior of the house was clean but clearly lacked a woman's touch, just as Fletcher had said. The furniture was practical and well made, but there were no curtains on the windows, no rugs on the floors, no decorative touches anywhere. The kitchen was spacious with a large cast iron stove, but the cupboards were sparsely stocked. "I mostly eat simple fare," Fletcher admitted, showing her the pantry. "Beans, bacon, bread. But there is money for proper groceries. We can go into town whenever you need supplies." Prudence ran her hand along the kitchen counter, already envisioning what she could do with the space. "I will make a list. With your permission, I would like to start a vegetable garden as well, and perhaps some chickens for fresh eggs." "Whatever you want," Fletcher said. "Prudence, I meant what I said earlier. Everything I have is yours now, too. This is your home, and I want you to feel comfortable here." She turned to face him, studying his features in the afternoon light streaming through the window. He had a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled more than she had seen so far. He was handsome in a rugged way, and something in his steady gaze made her feel safe. "May I ask what happened to your leg?" she asked softly. Fletcher glanced down, one hand moving unconsciously to his left thigh. "A bull caught me wrong about 2 years ago. Broke the bone in 3 places. Doc Morrison did his best, but it did not heal quite right. Does not slow me down much, though. I am sorry. That must have been painful. I have had worse." He met her eyes again. "Let me show you the upstairs." The stairs creaked under their weight as they climbed. Fletcher pointed out the first bedroom, which was clearly his. The bed was neatly made, and Prudence noticed a photograph on the dresser of a young woman with dark hair and a sweet smile. "That is Elizabeth," Fletcher said quietly. "My first wife. I keep her picture to remember, but it does not mean I am not ready to move forward. I hope that does not bother you." "Not at all," Prudence assured him. "She was part of your life. It would be wrong to pretend otherwise." He showed her the other 2 bedrooms, both empty except for basic furniture. "Take whichever you prefer. I will bring up some water so you can wash up and rest. Dinner is usually around 6. "I can cook," Prudence offered quickly. "Not today. You have had a long journey. Rest, and we will eat something simple tonight." After Fletcher left her alone in the bedroom she had chosen, the one furthest from his with a view of the endless prairie, Prudence finally allowed herself to sink onto the bed and let out a shaky breath. She was married to a stranger, in a strange land, with nothing to her name but a faded dress and borrowed boots, but the stranger had kind eyes and a gentle manner. The strange land was beautiful in its vastness, and Fletcher had told her that everything he had was hers now too. Prudence allowed herself the smallest spark of hope. True to his word, Fletcher brought up a pitcher of warm water and left it outside her door with a soft knock. Prudence used it to wash the travel dust from her face and hands, wishing desperately for a full bath and clean clothes. She did the best she could, then ventured downstairs as the sun began to sink lower in the sky. She found Fletcher in the kitchen, slicing bread and frying bacon. The domestic sight of such a large man cooking supper made her smile despite her exhaustion. "I told you I would cook," she said from the doorway. Fletcher turned, and this time she caught the hint of a smile on his lips. "And I told you to rest. Sit. This is nearly ready." They ate together at the dining table, and the silence was awkward at first. Prudence searched for things to say, questions to ask, anything to break the tension. "How long have you had the ranch?" she finally asked. "My father claimed the land in 1859, Fletcher said. "I grew up here. When he passed in 1870, it became mine. Elizabeth and I married in 1871. She died in 1874. Sam was my father's friend and has been here through it all. Billy came on last year when I needed an extra hand. It must have been hard, losing your father and then your wife so close together." "It was." Fletcher pushed beans around his plate. "But life goes on. The cattle need tending whether you are grieving or not. The ranch kept me going when I did not think I could." "I lost my parents to fever when I was 16, Prudence shared. "I went to live with my aunt, but she had 5 children of her own and could barely feed them. I found work at a textile factory, lived in a boarding house with other girls. It was not much of a life, but it was mine. When the factory closed 6 months ago, I ran through my savings quickly. I saw your advertisement in the newspaper, and it seemed like Providence." "Maybe it was," Fletcher said quietly. After dinner, Prudence insisted on washing the dishes. Fletcher dried them, and they worked side by side in the kitchen as darkness fell outside. When the last plate was put away, Fletcher lit several lamps to push back the shadows. "I usually check on the horses before bed," he said. "You are welcome to come along, or you can rest. Tomorrow will be soon enough for you to learn the routine around here." "I would like to see the horses," Prudence said. The thought of going up to that empty bedroom alone filled her with a strange dread. They walked to the barn together under a sky full of more stars than Prudence had ever seen in her life. She stopped in her tracks, staring up in wonder. "I have never seen so many stars," she breathed. Fletcher followed her gaze upward. "I forget sometimes how clear the sky is out here. When you grow up with it, you take it for granted. It is magnificent." In the barn, Fletcher introduced her to his horses. There were 6 in total, including 2 massive draft horses for heavy work and several riding horses. One of the riding horses, a pretty chestnut mare, stuck her nose over the stall door and whickered softly when Fletcher approached. "This is Rosie," he said, stroking the mare's nose. "She is the gentlest of the bunch. If you want to learn to ride, she would be a good teacher." "I have never been on a horse," Prudence admitted. "In Boston, we walked or took street cars. Then we will have to fix that. A rancher's wife should know how to ride." Prudence reached out tentatively to touch Rosie's soft nose, delighted when the mare nuzzled her palm. "She is beautiful. She is yours now if you want her." Prudence turned to Fletcher in shock. "Mine. Everything I have is yours now too," Fletcher repeated. "That includes Rosie. I will teach you to ride, and she can be your horse. Every woman should have a horse of her own out here." "I do not know what to say." Prudence felt overwhelmed by his generosity, by the casual way he gave her things without expecting anything in return. "Say you will let me teach you," Fletcher said with that hint of a smile again. "I have a feeling you will take to it quickly." They finished checking on the animals, and then Fletcher walked her back to the house. At the bottom of the stairs, they paused awkwardly. "If you need anything during the night, my door is open," Fletcher said. "And Prudence, thank you." "For what?" "For coming. For taking a chance on this, on me." Prudence felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you for giving me a chance at a new life." They stood there for a moment longer, and Prudence wondered if he would try to kiss her again. But Fletcher simply tipped his hat and headed toward his own room. Prudence climbed the stairs to hers, her mind whirling with thoughts of everything that had happened in one extraordinary day. She changed into the only nightgown she owned, another threadbare hand-me-down, and slipped between sheets that smelled of fresh air and sunshine. Through the window, she could see the vast expanse of stars, and somewhere in the distance, she heard cattle lowing softly. This was her life now. This ranch, this land, this stranger who was now her husband. Prudence closed her eyes and allowed herself to feel something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt hope. Prudence woke to the sound of roosters crowing and early morning light streaming through her window. For a moment she was disoriented, wondering where she was. Then memory flooded back. Nebraska. The ranch. Fletcher. She rose quickly and dressed in the same faded dress, painfully aware that she had nothing else to wear. Downstairs, she found the kitchen empty but evidence that Fletcher had already been up. Coffee sat warming on the stove, and a note lay on the table in neat handwriting. Gone to check on the herd with Sam and Billy. Help yourself to whatever you need. Back by mid-morning. Fletcher. Prudence poured herself coffee and added precious sugar from the canister, savoring the warmth and sweetness. She explored the kitchen more thoroughly in the morning light, taking stock of what supplies were available. The cupboards were indeed sparse, but there was flour, lard, some canned goods, and the basics for simple meals. She set about making biscuits, finding comfort in the familiar rhythm of measuring and mixing. By the time she had a batch in the oven, she heard horses approaching. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and stepped out onto the porch. Fletcher, Sam, and Billy were riding toward the house, and Prudence felt her breath catch at the sight of Fletcher on horseback. He sat the large bay gelding with easy confidence, moving with the horse as if they were one creature. When he spotted her on the porch, he raised a hand in greeting. "Something smells good," he called out as they drew closer. "Just biscuits," Prudence said. "I hope you do not mind. I needed to keep busy." "Mind, I am grateful." Fletcher swung down from his horse with barely a hitch in his stride despite his bad leg. "The boys will be two if you made enough to share." "I made plenty," Prudence assured him. Over fresh biscuits and bacon, the four of them sat around the kitchen table. Sam and Billy were clearly unused to having a woman present, sitting stiffly and minding their manners carefully. Prudence did her best to put them at ease, asking questions about the ranch and their work. "You have family nearby, Sam?" she asked. "No, madam. My wife passed years ago." "Never had children. Fletcher here is about as close to family as I got." "And you, Billy?" The young man blushed. "My folks have a farm about 20 miles east, 7 kids, and I am the oldest. Came to work for Mr. Patterson to ease the burden on them, send money home when I can." "That is very admirable," Prudence said warmly. After breakfast, Fletcher sent Sam and Billy back to their work and turned to Prudence. "I thought maybe we could take a ride around the property, let you see the place properly. That is, if you are up for your first riding lesson." Prudence felt a flutter of nervousness but nodded eagerly. "I would like that very much." In the barn, Fletcher saddled Rosie with practiced efficiency while explaining each step to Prudence. The mare stood patiently as Fletcher adjusted the stirrups for Prudence's shorter legs. "The key is to stay relaxed," Fletcher explained. "Horses can sense tension. Just move with her, trust her to know what she is doing." He helped Prudence mount, his hands strong and steady on her waist as he lifted her into the saddle. Prudence gasped at the height and the strange feeling of sitting astride such a large animal. "I have you," Fletcher assured her. "We will start slow." He led Rosie around the corral first, keeping a hand on the bridle while Prudence got used to the sensation. After a while, he mounted his own horse and they ventured out at a walk, with Fletcher staying close beside her. They rode toward a rise that overlooked much of the ranch. Fletcher pointed out the boundaries of his property, the best grazing areas, the creek that provided water year-round. Prudence was entranced by the beauty of it all, the way the morning sun gilded the grass and made the cattle in the distance look like toys. "It is so peaceful," she said. "So different from the city." "You miss it?" "The city, I mean." Prudence considered the question. "I miss the convenience of shops and people, but I do not miss the noise and the crowds and the soot. I do not miss the factory or the boarding house. This is better. This is clean and open. I think I could grow to love it here." "I hope you do," Fletcher said quietly. They rode for over an hour, and by the time they returned to the barn, Prudence's legs were aching and she felt slightly saddle sore. But she was smiling, exhilarated by the experience. "You did well," Fletcher praised her as he helped her dismount. His hands lingered on her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. "A natural." "I had a good teacher," Prudence replied, looking up at him. They stood close together in the dim barn, and Prudence became acutely aware of how tall Fletcher was, how broad his shoulders were. His dark eyes searched her face, and she wondered what he was thinking. "Prudence," he began, then seemed to think better of whatever he was going to say. "We should get you into town soon. You need proper clothes and supplies, whatever you want." "I cannot ask you to spend money on me," Prudence protested. "You are not asking, I am offering. You are my wife. Of course I will provide for you." He said it so matter-of-factly, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. They made the trip to Kearney 3 days later. Fletcher drove the wagon while Prudence sat beside him, making a mental list of everything she needed. The town was bigger than she had realized, with a main street lined with shops and businesses. Fletcher took her first to the general store, where the proprietor, a round-faced woman named Mrs. Chen, greeted them warmly. "Fletcher Patterson, as I live and breathe. I heard you got yourself a wife. This must be her. Mrs. Chen, this is Prudence. Prudence, Mrs. Chen runs the best store in 3 counties. Flattery will not get you discounts," Mrs. Chen said with a twinkle in her eye. "But for your lovely bride I might make an exception. What do you need, dear?" Prudence felt overwhelmed by the array of goods available. Bolts of fabric, ready-made dresses, boots, household items, foodstuffs, everything imaginable. She stood frozen, unsure where to begin. "Start with clothes," Fletcher encouraged. "You need at least 3 good dresses for everyday wear, a Sunday dress, a winter coat, boots, undergarments, whatever else you need." "Fletcher, that is too much," Prudence whispered. "It is what you need," he said firmly. "Mrs. Chen, help her pick out whatever she requires." Mrs. Chen took Prudence under her wing, efficiently pulling out fabrics and pre-made garments in colors that would suit Prudence's complexion. She measured Prudence for proper undergarments and helped her select sturdy boots that actually fit. "That husband of yours has been alone too long," Mrs. Chen said as she wrapped purchases. "It is good to see him with someone. He is a good man, Fletcher Patterson. Lost a lot, but he has never let it make him bitter." "He has been very kind to me," Prudence agreed. "Kindness matters more than romance in the long run," Mrs. Chen said wisely. "Though if you are lucky, you will get both." Fletcher also insisted Prudence choose fabrics and notions for sewing, cooking supplies, and various household items she had noticed were lacking at the ranch. By the time they finished, the wagon was loaded with packages. Their next stop was at a small office where a stern-looking man sat behind a desk. Fletcher introduced him as Walter Hayes, the county clerk. "I want to add Prudence to all the ranch accounts," Fletcher said. "Deed, bank account, everything, equal ownership." Prudence stared at him in shock. "Fletcher, you cannot." "I can and I will," he said firmly. "You are my wife. What is mine is yours. But we barely know each other. What if what? What if you decide to rob me blind and run off?" Fletcher's lips quirked in amusement. "Prudence, I trust you, and I want you to feel secure here. If something were to happen to me, I need to know you would be taken care of. This is the right thing to do." The clerk drew up the papers, and Prudence signed her new married name with shaking hands. Just like that, she was half owner of a 300-acre cattle ranch. She, who had come with nothing but a faded dress and borrowed boots, now had property and assets beyond her wildest dreams. On the ride home, Prudence was quiet, overwhelmed by Fletcher's generosity. "You are too good to me," she finally said. "I do not deserve such kindness." Fletcher glanced at her. "You deserve to be treated with respect and fairness. That is not being too good. That is being decent. Not all men would see it that way. Then not all men are worth marrying." Fletcher was quiet for a moment, then added, "My father raised me to believe that a wife is a partner, not property. My mother ran the ranch finances, made decisions alongside my father. That is the kind of marriage I want, the kind I had with Elizabeth. I hope it is the kind you want too." "It is," Prudence whispered. "I have never even dared to hope for such a thing." That evening, Prudence tried on her new clothes in the privacy of her bedroom. The dresses fit beautifully, and the undergarments were a luxury she had not experienced in years. She came downstairs wearing a simple day dress in a soft blue that brought out her eyes, and Fletcher looked up from the accounts he was reviewing. "You look lovely," he said, and there was something in his voice that made Prudence's heart skip. "Thank you, and thank you for everything today. I feel like a princess in a fairy tale. You deserve nice things." Fletcher stood and crossed to where she stood. "Prudence, I know this arrangement between us started out of mutual need, but I hope you know that I value you, not just for the cooking and cleaning, but for your company. I enjoy talking with you. I like having you here." Prudence felt her cheeks warm. "I enjoy being here. I enjoy talking with you too. You are nothing like I expected." "What did you expect?" "I do not know. Someone harder, perhaps, more demanding. Instead, you have been nothing but kind and patient." Fletcher reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers barely grazing her cheek. "I want you to be happy here, Prudence. I want this to be a real home for you." "It already is becoming one," she admitted. They stood close together, and Prudence felt drawn to him in a way she had not anticipated. When Fletcher bent his head slightly, she rose on her toes to meet him halfway. Their kiss was soft and sweet, a question and an answer all at once. When they parted, Fletcher rested his forehead against hers. "I am falling for you," he said quietly. "I did not think it could happen again, but it is." "I am falling for you too," Prudence confessed. "It frightens me. It frightens me too, but maybe that is all right." The next weeks passed in a blur of activity and discovery. Prudence threw herself into making the house a home, sewing curtains for the windows, braiding rag rugs for the floors, and cooking proper meals that made Sam and Billy sing her praises. Fletcher helped her start a vegetable garden, and they acquired chickens that Prudence tended faithfully. Fletcher taught her to ride more confidently, and soon Prudence was joining him on daily rounds of the property. She learned to recognize signs of illness in cattle, to mend fences, to read the weather by the shape of clouds on the horizon. The physical work was hard but satisfying in a way her factory job had never been. In the evenings, they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the prairie. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for the future. Fletcher told her about growing up on the ranch, about his parents and their loving marriage. Prudence told him about her childhood before her parents died, the few happy memories she had managed to hold on to. One evening in early September, as they sat close together on the porch swing Fletcher had repaired, Prudence gathered her courage. "Fletcher, I have been thinking about our sleeping arrangements." He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "Yes, I appreciate you giving me my own space. It was considerate and gentlemanly. But we have been married over a month now, and I think I am ready for this to be a real marriage in every way." Fletcher's eyes searched her face. "Are you certain? I do not want you to feel pressured." "I am certain. I care for you deeply, Fletcher. I want to be your wife fully." He took her hand, raising it to his lips to kiss her knuckles gently. "Then tonight, if you are willing, come to my room. Not because you feel you owe me anything. but because you want to. That night, Prudence knocked softly on Fletcher's bedroom door, wearing her new nightgown and a robe. Her heart pounded with nervousness and anticipation. Fletcher opened the door, already dressed for bed in simple cotton pants and an undershirt. "Come in," he said softly, taking her hand and drawing her inside. The room was lit by a single lamp that cast a warm glow over everything. Fletcher had turned down the bed, and Prudence noticed he had placed wildflowers in a vase on the dresser, next to the photograph of Elizabeth that had been turned face down. "Are you sure about this?" Fletcher asked one more time. Instead of answering, Prudence reached up and kissed him. This kiss was different from their previous ones, deeper and more urgent. Fletcher's arms came around her, pulling her close, and Prudence melted into his embrace. They came together slowly, gently, Fletcher taking his time to make sure Prudence was comfortable and ready for each new intimacy. There was some pain, as was natural for her first time, but Fletcher was patient and tender, whispering reassurances and making sure her pleasure matched his own. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, Fletcher's arms around Prudence protectively. She rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Are you all right?" he asked, stroking her hair. "More than all right. That was beautiful. It will be even better as we learn each other," Fletcher promised. "I love you, Prudence." "I know it is fast, but I cannot deny what I feel." "I love you too," Prudence said, lifting her head to look at him. "I did not think I could be this happy." "Neither did I." From that night forward, Prudence slept in Fletcher's room, and the ranch house felt complete in a way it had not before. They settled into a rhythm of married life that felt both comfortable and exciting. Fletcher surprised her often with small gifts: a hair ribbon from town, a book he thought she would enjoy, a special cut of meat from the butcher. Prudence expressed her love through the care she put into their home and meals, through the way she listened when Fletcher talked about his concerns for the ranch, through the passionate welcome she gave him each night when he came to bed. Sam and Billy noticed the change and seemed pleased by it. The atmosphere around the ranch was happier, lighter. Billy even worked up the courage to ask if he could invite his family for Sunday dinner, and Prudence enthusiastically agreed. Meeting the Hayes family was overwhelming in the best way. Billy's parents, Thomas and Ruth Hayes, were weathered but kind people who clearly loved their large brood. The 7 children ranged from Billy at 19 down to the youngest, a gap-toothed girl of 6 named Sarah. "It is a blessing to see Billy so well settled," Ruth said to Prudence as they worked together in the kitchen. "You and Fletcher have given him a good place." "Billy is a wonderful worker," Prudence replied. "We are lucky to have him." The dinner was chaotic and joyful, with children laughing and talking over each other while the adults tried to maintain some semblance of order. Fletcher was surprisingly good with the children, letting the youngest ones climb on him like a jungle gym, and listening with apparent interest to the middle boy's detailed explanation of how to catch frogs. Watching him, Prudence felt a pang of longing. She imagined Fletcher with children of their own, imagined filling the empty bedrooms upstairs with the sounds of little feet and laughter. As autumn progressed, the work on the ranch intensified as they prepared for winter. They butchered hogs, canned vegetables from the garden, and made sure they had adequate hay stored for the cattle. Fletcher hired additional help for the fall roundup, temporary hands who would move on once the work was done. Prudence found herself in charge of feeding the crew, cooking enormous meals 3 times a day for up to 10 hungry men. It was exhausting work, but she took pride in hearing their compliments and seeing their empty plates. One of the temporary hands, a rough man named Jack Durham, made Prudence uncomfortable with the way he watched her. He never said or did anything overtly inappropriate, but there was something in his eyes that made her skin crawl. She mentioned it to Fletcher one evening, and his jaw tightened. "I will handle it." The next day, Fletcher paid Durham and sent him on his way. When Sam questioned it, Fletcher said simply, "He made my wife uncomfortable. That is reason enough." October brought cooler weather and the first hints of the hard winter to come. Prudence and Fletcher rode out one afternoon to check on the herd, bundled in warm coats against the crisp air. They dismounted at the same rise where Fletcher had first shown her the ranch, now golden with autumn colors. "I have been thinking," Fletcher said, standing behind Prudence with his arms around her waist as they looked out over the land, "about expanding the herd next year, maybe trying to breed some of the newer cattle strains I have been hearing about. It would be a risk, but the potential profits are substantial." "What does Sam think?" Prudence asked. "He is cautious but willing." "What do you think?" Prudence turned in his arms to face him. "You are asking my opinion, of course. You are half owner of this ranch, remember." "Your opinion matters." Prudence considered it seriously. "I think if the potential gain is worth the risk, and we can afford to lose what we invest if it does not work out, then we should try. Progress requires taking chances." Fletcher smiled and kissed her soundly. "My intelligent wife." "I know nothing about cattle," Prudence protested, laughing. "You know about risk and reward. You know about taking chances. You took a chance coming here, and look how well that turned out." In November, Prudence realized her monthly courses were late. She waited, not wanting to raise hopes prematurely, but when 2 months passed with no sign, she could no longer deny the possibility. She was pregnant. Prudence told Fletcher one evening after dinner, simply and directly, "I think I am carrying our child." Fletcher's face went through a series of expressions: shock, joy, and then worry. "Are you certain?" "Fairly certain. I will need to see a doctor to be sure, but all the signs are there." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I am terrified," he admitted. "After Elizabeth, I know," Prudence said gently, "but I am not Elizabeth. Each pregnancy is different. We will be careful. We will do everything right." "I cannot lose you," Fletcher said fiercely. "I love you too much." "You will not lose me. I am strong, Fletcher, stronger than I look." The next day they went to see Dr. Harrison in Kearney, an older gentleman with gentle hands and a reassuring manner. He confirmed Prudence's suspicion. "You are about 2 months along, I would estimate. The baby should arrive in June. You are young and healthy. I see no reason for undue concern, but you must take care. Good food, plenty of rest, no overexertion." Fletcher took the instructions seriously, perhaps too seriously. He fretted over Prudence constantly, trying to prevent her from doing any work at all. After a week of his hovering, Prudence finally had to put her foot down. "Fletcher Patterson, I love you, but you are driving me to distraction. I am not made of glass. Women work through pregnancy all the time. I will not overdo it, but neither will I sit idle for 7 months." Sam and Billy found Fletcher's overprotectiveness amusing, teasing him mercilessly about it. But Prudence noticed they also kept a watchful eye on her, ready to help with any heavy lifting or strenuous task. Winter settled in with force in December, bringing snow and bitter cold. The work of ranching continued despite the weather, but there was less outdoor work and more time spent on indoor maintenance and bookkeeping. Prudence found herself with time to sew baby clothes, to prepare one of the spare rooms as a nursery. Fletcher helped her paint the room a cheerful yellow and built a beautiful cradle from smooth oak, working on it in secret in the barn until it was finished. "It is perfect," Prudence said, running her hand over the polished wood. "Our baby will be so loved." Christmas came, and Prudence insisted on having Sam and Billy join them for the holiday dinner. She had knitted scarves for both men, and Fletcher gave them each a substantial bonus. The ranch hands gave them a beautiful quilt that Ruth Hayes had made, knowing about the baby. "For the little one," Sam said gruffly. "Every baby needs a proper quilt." The new year, 1879, arrived with hope and anticipation. Prudence's belly began to swell visibly, and Fletcher loved to place his hand on it, marveling at the life growing inside her. When the baby first kicked, he laughed with delight. "Strong," he said. "Like his mother," or her mother, Prudence corrected with a smile. "I do not care which, as long as you both come through healthy." As winter began to loosen its grip and spring approached, Prudence found herself growing excited and nervous about the impending birth. She had seen enough in the city to know that childbirth was dangerous, that many women did not survive it. Fletcher sensed her fears and held her close at night. "You are going to be fine. We are both going to be fine. I believe it with everything in me." In April, as Prudence entered her 7th month, a spring storm blew in with unusual ferocity. The wind howled around the house, and heavy rain battered the roof. Fletcher and the hands were out securing the animals and making sure nothing was damaged when Prudence heard a pounding on the front door. She opened it to find a woman standing there, soaked to the bone and shivering. She was young, perhaps 20, with dark hair plastered to her face. "Please," the woman gasped. "My wagon overturned. My husband is hurt. Please help us." "Of course. Come in." Prudence ushered her inside and grabbed blankets. "Where is your husband?" "About a mile back, off the main road. He cannot walk. I think his leg is broken." "My husband and his men will help. They should be back any moment." True to her word, Fletcher and the others returned within minutes, soaked but unharmed. When Prudence explained the situation, Fletcher immediately organized a rescue party. "You stay here with her," Fletcher told Prudence. "Keep warm. I will bring her husband back." They rode out into the storm, and Prudence helped the woman, who introduced herself as Clara Thompson, into dry clothes and served her hot coffee. Clara's teeth chattered as she explained that they were traveling to Kearney from Colorado, hoping to start fresh. "We have nothing," Clara said miserably. "We lost everything in a fire last year. We thought maybe in Nebraska we could begin again." "You will," Prudence assured her. "There are good people here. You are not alone." An hour later, Fletcher and the men returned carrying a young man on a makeshift stretcher. His leg was clearly broken, and he was in considerable pain. They settled him on the sofa while Prudence fetched her medical supplies. She had learned basic first aid from Dr. Harrison, knowing that on a ranch, injuries were inevitable. While Fletcher held the man, Robert Thompson, still, Prudence set the leg as carefully as she could and splinted it properly. "You will need to see Dr. Harrison as soon as the storm passes," she told Robert, "but this should hold until then." "Thank you," Robert gasped. "We are so grateful." The Thompsons ended up staying for 3 days until Robert was well enough to be moved to town. During that time, Prudence and Clara became friends, sharing stories and hopes for the future. When Fletcher drove them to town in the wagon, Robert tried to pay them for their help. "Keep your money," Fletcher said firmly. "Use it to get settled. Pay it forward someday when you meet someone else in need." May brought warmer weather and blooming wildflowers across the prairie. Prudence was enormous now, moving slowly and tiring easily. Dr. Harrison visited the ranch to check on her, pronouncing her and the baby perfectly healthy. "Any day now," he said. "When the pains start, send someone to fetch me immediately." The pains began on a warm night in early June. Prudence woke Fletcher, trying to stay calm even as fear gripped her. "It is time," she said. Fletcher was out of bed in an instant, pulling on clothes. "I will get the doctor. Sam will stay with you." "Fletcher, do not leave me," Prudence pleaded, suddenly terrified. He stopped and came back to her, taking her face in his hands. "I will be as fast as I can. You are strong. You can do this. I love you. I love you too." Fletcher raced to Kearney in record time, returning with Dr. Harrison just as dawn was breaking. The doctor examined Prudence and settled in for what he said would likely be a long day. He was right. The labor was long and difficult. Prudence had never experienced such pain, but Fletcher stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, offering water, supporting her however he could. As the sun began to set, Dr. Harrison said, "All right, my dear. It is time to push." Prudence bore down with all her strength, drawing on reserves she did not know she had. Fletcher whispered encouragement, his face pale but determined. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, a baby's cry filled the room. "It is a boy," Dr. Harrison announced. "A healthy boy." The doctor placed the baby on Prudence's chest, and she looked down in wonder at the tiny, perfect life they had created. He had Fletcher's dark hair and a healthy set of lungs. "Our son," Fletcher breathed, tears streaming down his face. Thank you for this gift." "What should we name him?" Prudence asked tiredly. Fletcher thought for a moment. "James, after my father, James Samuel, if Sam can stand having a baby named after him." Sam, who had been hovering anxiously outside the door, was summoned to meet the baby. When he learned of the name, the old cowboy's eyes grew suspiciously bright. "That is an honor I do not deserve," he said gruffly, "but I will do my best to live up to it." The first weeks with baby James were exhausting and wonderful. Prudence was grateful for Fletcher's hands-on approach to fatherhood. He changed diapers, walked the floor with a crying baby in the middle of the night, and looked at his son with such love it made Prudence's heart ache. "I never thought I would have this again," Fletcher told her one evening as they watched James sleep in his cradle. "A family. A future. You gave me back my hope, Prudence." "We gave each other hope," Prudence corrected. As summer progressed, they settled into a routine with the baby. Prudence discovered she loved being a mother, despite the challenges. James was a good baby, healthy and alert, already showing signs of his father's temperament. In August, Robert and Clara Thompson came to visit, bringing gifts for the baby. They had settled in Kearney, where Robert had found work at the railroad and Clara was taking in sewing. "We wanted to thank you properly," Clara said, "for your kindness when we needed it most, and to tell you that we are expecting our own child this winter." "That is wonderful news," Prudence said, embracing her friend. The Thompsons became regular visitors, and the friendship between the two couples deepened. It was good to have friends their own age, people who understood the challenges of building a life in this still somewhat wild land. Fall came again, bringing the now familiar rhythm of harvest and preparation for winter. James was sitting up on his own, reaching for everything, filling the house with delighted gurgles and occasional wails. One evening in October, as they sat on the porch with James playing on a blanket between them, Prudence reflected on how much her life had changed in just over a year. "You remember when I first arrived?" she asked Fletcher. "How terrified I was. I had nothing. No possessions, no prospects, no hope." "I remember thinking you were the bravest woman I had ever met," Fletcher replied. "Coming all this way to marry a stranger, taking such a risk." "It was the best risk I ever took." Prudence leaned against his shoulder. "You gave me everything, Fletcher. A home, a family, a purpose. Love. You gave me those things too," Fletcher said. "After Elizabeth died, I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone, just going through the motions. Then your letter arrived and something in it spoke to me. You were honest about your circumstances, did not try to pretend to be something you were not. I admired that. I am glad you did." James babbled and held up his arms to his father. Fletcher scooped him up, tossing him gently in the air and catching him, making the baby shriek with laughter. "Our son will grow up knowing he is loved," Fletcher said. "Knowing his mother is strong and brave, knowing his father will always be there for him, and knowing he has the best surrogate uncle in Sam," Prudence added with a smile. Indeed, Sam had become utterly devoted to James, carving him toys and making up nonsense songs that made the baby laugh. Billy, too, was enamored, always volunteering to watch James when Fletcher and Prudence needed a break. Winter arrived, bringing the Thompsons' baby girl, whom they named Prudence Clara in honor of her mother and the friend who had helped them. Prudence was touched beyond words and visited Clara and the baby as soon as the weather permitted. "She is beautiful," Prudence said, cradling the tiny infant. "I am so honored." "You saved our lives," Clara said simply. "It seemed only right." The winter was hard but joyful. Christmas was celebrated with Sam, Billy, and the Thompsons. James was toddling now, getting into everything, keeping everyone on their toes. As 1880 dawned, Fletcher announced his plan to expand the ranch operations as they had discussed more than a year ago. "I have the capital saved. The market is good. I think it is time." Prudence agreed, and they spent the winter planning. Sam was cautiously optimistic, and even Billy offered input from what his father had taught him about selective breeding. Spring brought new calves, and the arrival of the breeding stock Fletcher had purchased. It was a risk, but one they could afford. The ranch was thriving, and they had built a solid foundation. One evening in April, as Prudence nursed a sleepy James before bed, Fletcher came to sit beside her. "I have been thinking," he said, "about everything that has happened since you arrived. About how empty this house was before you came, about how full my heart is now." "I have been thinking about that too," Prudence said, "about how I came here with nothing and you told me that everything you had was mine too. I meant it. I know you did. But Fletcher, I want you to know that you have given me so much more than material things. You gave me dignity. You treated me as an equal partner from the beginning. You valued my opinions. You loved me not for what I could give you, but for who I am." Fletcher reached out and cupped her face gently. "That is because you are worthy of love and respect, Prudence. You always were, even when you did not believe it yourself." "I believe it now," she said softly. "Because of you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their son drift into sleep. Outside, the prairie stretched endlessly under a sky full of stars. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed softly. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the promise of summer. This was home. This was family. This was the life they had built together from nothing but hope and mutual respect, and a growing love that had surprised them both. "Are you happy?" Fletcher asked quietly. Prudence looked around at the home she had made, at the man she loved, at the child sleeping peacefully in her arms. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the desperate gamble she had taken, the unexpected joy she had found. "I am more than happy," she said. "I am blessed beyond measure." "So am I," Fletcher whispered, leaning over to kiss her gently. "So am I." The seasons continued their eternal cycle. Spring turned to summer, summer to fall, and fall to winter again. James grew from a toddler into a rambunctious little boy with his father's dark eyes and his mother's quick smile. The ranch prospered beyond Fletcher's most optimistic projections. The new breeding program was a success, and they were able to hire 2 more permanent hands. Prudence discovered she was pregnant again in the fall of 1881. This time there was less fear, more excitement. Fletcher still hovered, but not as desperately as before. Their daughter was born in May of 1882, a beautiful baby girl they named Ruth Elizabeth, after Fletcher's mother and his first wife. Prudence had suggested including Elizabeth in their daughter's name. "She was part of your life, part of who you are," Prudence had said. "I am not threatened by her memory. I am grateful she taught you how to love." James, now nearly 3, was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to help care for her. Sam and Billy were equally smitten, competing for chances to hold her. With 2 children and a growing ranch, life was busy but fulfilling. Prudence sometimes thought back to that desperate young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach with nothing but a faded dress and borrowed boots, and she marveled at how far she had come. She had learned to ride as well as any cowboy, could rope a calf when needed, and had become Fletcher's true partner in running the ranch. The townspeople respected her, sought her advice, invited her to socials and church gatherings. But more than any external measure of success, Prudence treasured the love she had found. Fletcher's love was steady and true, expressed in 1,000 small ways every day. The way he always made sure she had the best cut of meat at dinner. The way he brought her wildflowers for no reason. The way he still kissed her goodbye every morning as if she were precious beyond measure. In 1883, Billy Hayes announced he would be marrying a girl from town, and Fletcher and Prudence hosted the wedding at the ranch. It was a joyous occasion, with half the county in attendance. "You have built something good here," Thomas Hayes told Fletcher at the reception. "Not just a successful ranch, but a place where people feel welcome. That matters." Sam, now well into his 60s, was slowing down but refused to retire. "I will die with my boots on," he declared. "This ranch is my home, and you folks are my family." The Thompsons now had 3 children and a thriving household goods store in Kearney. They remained close friends, their children growing up together. Time moved forward, bringing both joys and challenges. They weathered harsh winters and drought summers, but the ranch remained strong. Fletcher's gamble on improved breeding had paid off handsomely, and the Patterson Ranch was known throughout the county for the quality of its cattle. Prudence gave birth to 2 more children, another son in 1884 whom they named Samuel William, and another daughter in 1886 whom they named Mary Grace. The house that had once seemed too large and empty was now filled with the chaos and joy of 4 children. James grew into a serious boy who loved the ranch and could not wait to work alongside his father. Ruth Elizabeth was willful and independent, already declaring she wanted to be a cattle buyer when she grew up. Sam seemed to inherit his namesake's gentle nature, while Mary was still too young to show much personality beyond her cheerful disposition. On their 7th wedding anniversary, Fletcher surprised Prudence with a trip to Omaha. Sam and Billy agreed to watch the children and the ranch for a week. "A week alone with my wife," Fletcher said. "No children, no cattle, no responsibilities. Just us." They stayed in a fine hotel, ate at restaurants, and enjoyed the simple pleasure of adult conversation without constant interruptions. One evening, as they walked along the streets of the city, Prudence reflected on the irony. "I spent so many years longing to escape the city," she said. "And now I appreciate visiting one, but I cannot wait to get back home to the ranch." "Home," Fletcher repeated. "I love hearing you call it that. It is home, more home than anywhere I ever lived before." On their last night in Omaha, as they lay together in the hotel bed, Fletcher pulled Prudence close. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Answering that advertisement? Coming west to marry a stranger?" "Never. Not for a single moment," Prudence said firmly. "Do you regret placing the advertisement? My only regret is that I did not do it sooner, so I could have had more years with you." "We have many years ahead of us still," Prudence said. "A whole lifetime to build on what we have started." They returned to the ranch to find everything running smoothly and their children ecstatic to see them. James had apparently been a wonderful big brother, helping Sam keep the younger ones in line. "You have a good boy there," Sam told Fletcher. "He will make a fine rancher someday." As the 1880s drew to a close, Fletcher and Prudence's partnership had transformed the ranch into one of the most successful operations in central Nebraska. They had weathered personal losses, too. Sam passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1889, leaving a hole in their hearts but also a legacy of wisdom and kindness. They buried him on the ranch with a simple headstone that read, "Sam Cooper, friend, mentor, family." Billy had taken over as foreman, proving himself more than capable. His own family was growing, and Fletcher had helped him purchase land adjacent to the ranch where Billy was building his own small operation. As 1890 arrived, Prudence found herself reflecting on a full decade of marriage. She was 32 now, a mother of 4, a rancher's wife, a property owner. She bore little resemblance to that frightened young woman who had arrived with nothing. One spring morning, she stood on the porch watching Fletcher teach James how to rope. Her son was almost 11 now, tall for his age and eager to learn everything his father could teach him. Ruth Elizabeth was helping her younger siblings feed the chickens, bossing them around in a way that made Prudence smile. Fletcher looked up and caught her watching. He handed the rope to James and walked over to join her on the porch. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, sliding an arm around her waist. "About how different my life is from what I imagined it would be," Prudence said. "When I was working in that factory in Boston, I never dared to dream I could have this. A loving husband, beautiful children, a home I am proud of." "You earned all of it," Fletcher said, "through your hard work and dedication." "We earned it together," Prudence corrected. "You made me your partner from the very beginning. You told me that everything you had was mine too, and you meant it. That changed everything." Fletcher turned her to face him. "It was the truth, and it still is. Everything I have, everything I am, is yours, always has been, always will be." Prudence reached up to cup his face, studying the lines that time had etched there, the gray starting to show at his temples. He was 42 now, but still strong and vital, still the man who had met her at the stage-coach with kindness and patience. "I love you," she said simply, "more than I can possibly express. I love you too. You are the best decision I ever made." They kissed there on the porch, husband and wife, partners in every sense of the word. When they pulled apart, they saw their children watching them with a mixture of embarrassment and delight. "Papa is kissing Mama again," Samuel announced to his siblings. "They are always kissing," Ruth Elizabeth said with exaggerated exasperation. "You would think they would be tired of it by now." Fletcher and Prudence laughed, and Fletcher called out, "When you find the right person, you never get tired of kissing them." "That is disgusting," James said, but he was smiling. As the day wore on and chores were completed, the family gathered for dinner around the large table that had seen countless meals. Prudence looked around at the faces she loved, at the children they had created, at the life they had built. After dinner, after the children were in bed, Fletcher and Prudence returned to the porch as had become their habit. The stars shone brilliantly overhead, and a warm breeze carried the scent of prairie grass and cattle. "I have been thinking," Fletcher said. "In a few years, James will be ready to take on more responsibility. Maybe it is time we started teaching him the business side of things, not just the ranch work." "He is smart and eager," Prudence agreed. "He will learn quickly, and Ruth Elizabeth should learn too. She has a head for figures and a sharp mind." "Agreed. Our daughters will inherit equally with our sons. They should all know how to run this place." It was so typical of Fletcher, Prudence thought. Always fair, always thinking of the future, always valuing people for their capabilities rather than their gender. "You are a good father," she said, "and a good husband. I try to be. You make it easy." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, then Fletcher said, Do you remember that first night when you knocked on my bedroom door? Prudence felt heat rise to her cheeks even after all these years. I remember being terrified and excited all at once. I was terrified too, Fletcher admitted. Terrified I would disappoint you, that you would realize you had made a mistake marrying me. Never, not once have I thought that. Good, because you are stuck with me now, gladly, Prudence said, leaning into his warmth. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and challenge. They expanded the ranch again, purchasing adjacent land from a neighbor who was retiring. James, now a young man, was indeed proving himself capable of taking over much of the day-to-day operations. Fletcher began teaching him about contracts and negotiations, bringing him along on business trips to learn the commercial side of ranching. Ruth Elizabeth, true to her declarations, showed a remarkable aptitude for understanding market trends. At 14, she was already studying newspaper reports and advising her father on when to sell and when to hold stock. Fletcher listened to her insights with the same seriousness he gave anyone's opinion. The younger children were growing too. Samuel showed a talent for working with horses, able to gentle even the most skittish animal. Mary, the baby, was proving to be a gifted seamstress and artist, often sketching the ranch and its animals. Prudence and Fletcher's marriage only deepened with time. They had weathered storms, both literal and figurative, had buried friends and celebrated births, had built something lasting and true. In 1895, as they approached their 17th anniversary, Fletcher took Prudence riding to the same overlook where he had first shown her the ranch all those years ago. The children were old enough now to be left alone for an afternoon. They dismounted and stood together, looking out over the land that stretched as far as the eye could see. The ranch had grown significantly, now one of the largest operations in the region. 17 years, Fletcher said. Sometimes it feels like just yesterday you stepped off that stagecoach. Other times it feels like you have always been here. I feel the same way, Prudence said. This is who I am now, not the frightened girl from Boston, but the woman who built this life with you. Fletcher pulled a small box from his pocket. I have something for you. Prudence opened it to find a beautiful locket on a delicate chain. Inside were tiny photographs of all 4 of their children. Fletcher, it is beautiful. Open the other side. She did, and found a picture of the 2 of them on their wedding day, a photograph she had not even known existed. Mrs. Morrison took it, Fletcher explained. The preacher's wife. She gave it to me years later. I wanted you to have it, to remember where we started and how far we have come. Prudence's eyes filled with tears as she studied the photograph. She looked so young and uncertain, Fletcher so serious and guarded. They were practically strangers in that picture, bound by law but not yet by love. Look at us, she whispered. We had no idea what we were getting into. Best leap of faith I ever took, Fletcher said. Mine too. He fastened the locket around her neck, and Prudence touched it reverently. I will treasure this always. They stood in each other's arms, looking out over their land, their legacy. The cattle grazed peacefully. The ranch buildings were well maintained and prosperous. The gardens Prudence had planted years ago were flourishing. Everything spoke of care and hard work and love. We did this, Prudence said. Together we built something wonderful. We did, Fletcher agreed, and it will continue after us. James and Ruth Elizabeth and Samuel and Mary, they will carry it forward. They will build on what we started. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Fletcher and Prudence mounted their horses and rode back to the ranch house. Smoke rose from the chimney where Ruth Elizabeth was preparing supper. They could hear laughter from inside, the sounds of their family. Home, Prudence said softly. Home, Fletcher echoed. They dismounted and took care of the horses together, working with the easy synchronization that came from years of partnership. As they walked toward the house hand in hand, Prudence felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. She had come to Nebraska with nothing but desperation and hope. She had arrived wearing a faded dress and borrowed boots, prepared to marry a stranger for survival's sake. Instead, she had found love. She had found partnership. She had found a man who valued her as an equal, who shared everything he had without hesitation or expectation, who had meant it when he said that everything he had was hers too. They had built a life together, brick by brick and day by day. They had created a family, raised children who were strong and capable and kind. They had turned a ranch into a legacy. As they entered the house to the welcoming chaos of their children's greetings, as they sat down together for another family meal, as they laughed and talked and simply existed in each other's presence, Prudence knew beyond any doubt that she was exactly where she was meant to be. This was her happily ever after. Not a fairy tale perfect life without challenges, but a real life built on mutual respect, hard work, and abiding love. A life where a mail-order bride who came with nothing found that she had always had everything that truly mattered. She had courage, resilience, and the capacity to love and be loved in return. And that, Prudence thought as she looked around at the faces she held most dear in all the world, was worth more than any dowry or possession could ever be. Fletcher caught her eye across the table and smiled, that special smile reserved just for her. After 17 years, it still made her heart flutter. She smiled back, touching the locket at her throat. Everything he had was hers, and everything she was his. Together, they had created something beautiful and lasting. Together, they had come home.